Every journey gets us closer to the same truth. We all need connection.
You are watching In Conversation This Week with Miceal O'Hurley.
This is Miceal O'Hurley with Diplomacy in Ireland, In Conversation This Week. I have on the line right now Mr. Chris Melzer. Chris is a senior spokesperson for the United Nations UNHCR. He is at the Polish border right now dealing with the tens of thousands of evacuees from the war in Ukraine. Chris, how are you?
Well, I'm more or less fine. So it's not easy to see all the people here and how they suffer. But we try to help as good as we can.
Let me just get some context for our viewers. What is the temperature outside?
In the night, it's freezing. So it's in the 20s in Fahrenheit or around 0 in Celsius. On the day, it's pretty nice, but also cold. But most of the people are spending also the night here in the cars or even outside, and then it's pretty harsh.
Are many people entering Poland by foot?
Several thousands. I think definitely the majority is doing this by car, but we also know that a lot of people are coming from the nearby villages or towns, sometimes by foot, but normally they're coming with a bus or with a train to the border area, and then they are walking. And we have also heard that people are taking their cars to the border, abandon the car there, and then walking to Poland to safety.
I have spoken to people in the last day who have told me that a travel of what would have been an hour and a half is now 20 hours long. How long is the line at the border?
Well, this is we were just on one border crossing point, and the border guards told us it's 14 kilometers, so almost 10 miles. And we talked to refugees, and they told us something about 36, 40 hours. They have to wait there. One woman said, we are now 3 days on the road. It cost us alone 12 hours to leave Kiev. Then we were on the road for a short while, and then at the border, another 38 hours now. And this is quite typical for the situation on all of the border crossing points to Poland, and I'm afraid also to Slovakia and Romania and Moldova.
Have the reports that Hungary has effectively closed their border, are those true? Do you know? Have you heard anything?
I can't say something at this point because I'm really in Poland, and here at the border, it's also the internet is not that good. What I can say is that Poland is still shows a lot of solidarity, not only the government, but also the people here who are really very, very, very brave and showing a lot of solidarity.
Are there lots of children and elderly amongst those entering Poland?
This is the majority of the people. So you barely see a man who's probably younger than 70 or 65 or something like that. The vast majority of the people who are sitting in the cars, who are coming by bus, these are women and children, often babies.
Chris, I've dealt with these issues in Iraq, Afghanistan, South and Central America. Bosnia Herzegovina, I remember the number of children, unaccompanied minors who were separated from parents just so they could try to get to safety. Have you experienced any of that yet, or are they still moving as family units?
The most of them are within their family, but yes, we have heard of these cases. Probably cases where during the chaotic scenes in Ukraine, children were somehow separated from the families, and this is of course very concerning.
Chris, a lot of people fleeing may not have proper documentation. They're fleeing, I suppose, under the Schengen Treaty. They aren't required, at least for 90 days, to have a permit. Poland is being extremely supportive because of the humanitarian crisis. But ultimately, many of these people will not have international passports. They may not have birth certificates or other necessary documents. Many will only have the internal passport that Ukraine issues. How critical will this be in processing them in the future?
I think the majority of the people have proper documents, but you're absolutely right, not every one of them. So what is with the other people? UNHCR is calling actually often in situation like that, also in Ethiopia and Afghanistan and Bangladesh, and also, of course, here in the Ukraine situation, that governments accept other kind of documents, legal documents, and even if you don't have any kind of documents, don't send the people away. It's absolutely clear that a state, a government would like to know what kind of people are coming to the country. But you can't send the people away if they don't have these proper documents. There is always a way to find out the identity, and we call the governments to use these alternatives. But right now, as you have also mentioned, it works here with the neighboring countries of Ukraine.
Chris, I'm concerned about people who may want to transit on past the frontier's borders. Ireland, which has not been a member of the Schengen area, has announced that they are waiving the requirement for a visa for all Ukrainians at this time, not just those Ukrainians with family members inside of Ireland. The impediment becomes the Dublin Protocol that requires that they be processed as asylum seekers in the first European country they enter, and that without proper travel documents, they may not be able to get to Ireland. Do you have any insight into how these people may be able to travel on past the Polish border, or is Poland prepared to absorb what are estimated to be 5 million refugees and evacuees over the next several days?
First, we must see that the majority of the displaced people is still in Ukraine and will probably remain in the Ukraine within that country as alternative displaced persons. From the people who are fleeing, we are quite sure that the big majority will stay in the neighboring country, in the first countries where they found asylum. But you are, of course, very right that a lot of people probably want to join family members, as maybe in Ireland. We have heard from other European countries very good information. So it sounds like there's also solidarity within the governments that they want to support these people. And this is actually the same thing we are asking here, like in other refugee situations. So we're doing that in Asia, we're doing it in Africa, we're doing it in Europe now, that we say the countries who took in the first and the most refugees should find some kind of relief, and that could also mean that other countries, let's say probably my home country of Germany, and of course also Ireland, supports countries like Romania, Moldavia, or Poland.
Chris, in these situations, there's often a tendency by people to feel great sympathy and be moved to try to send clothing, bottled water. And the problem is I've seen runways littered across the world in these situations where we have to wade through things that are littering the runway and actually block humanitarian flights. What is the best way people can help at this point, especially with the UNHCR, who does the world's heavy lifting?
I see two main ways what you can do. The one is really support UNHCR. Our Ukraine situation is funded by 9%. So not the gap is 9%. We are funded by 9%. So the gap is 91%. So we need more support there. And in-kind donations, I understand that this is generous and this is great, but we just can't handle that. So financial support would be fantastic, but also support for refugees in general. So if you have refugees around, talk to them, ask them for their stories, help them to integrate. This is a thing you can do for free, and maybe even for your own benefit, because sometimes friendship comes out of this.
And I think many people will be surprised to find how European the Ukrainians are. They've been Europeans for over 1,000 years, even though they often get thrown into the basket of Russia. But that's another story. Chris, what kind of numbers are you expecting in the next 24 to 48 hours and in the long term?
This is very hard to estimate, and we refrain normally to do these estimations. The problem is that if you want to give if a serious figure, then the range is so big that it can't really help. So if I take Poland alone, they have accepted now about 120, 130,000 people in less than 3 days. We can imagine that there are, at the end, a 7-digit number of people who will leave the Ukraine. But it's very hard to predict. Definitely in the next 24, 48 hours, as you said, it will continue what we have now. Everything else, we hope the same, like the refugees hope that they can go home very soon.
It all depends on how the war continues to unfold, and no one can guess. I just wanted to give some kind of a scope so people know it's time to dig deep. The humanitarian crisis here isn't just Ukraine. How many millions of people do the UNHCR help every year?
Well, we have worldwide a little more than 20 million refugees, 21.5 million refugees. But actually, the number of displaced people is much bigger than, because there are another 49,000 internal displaced people. For the status of a refugee, you need to be outside of your home country. But when you're in your home country and you're a refugee there, like in the Ukraine, for example, you need help as well. We try to help these people. So this is a figure in total of 81 million people. We just can't help all of them, but indeed, millions of people are getting support from UNHCR every day. I worked, for example, in Kutupalong. This is Bangladesh, the biggest refugee camp in the world, with 640,000 inhabitants. We do it in Africa. We do it in a Syria situation. We do it in Europe as well. Sad enough that we have to. But again, about 1% of the world population is displaced. We should never forget that.
Chris, I just want to be clear and underscore 2 issues to help our audience have context. The camp you talked about would make it Ireland's 2nd largest city, larger even than Cork. And that I want to underscore your comments about receiving people. We often get hung up in a negative attitude about asylum seekers and refugees. It's time for us to open our hearts and minds and really understand the tragedy. Sadly, maybe it will take this European experience to dispel some of those myths. Any last thoughts before we go, Chris?
Actually, we talked about it. Let's never forget what this is in Europe, in our home. Actually, it's not that far away. It's from Ireland. I don't know, a little more than 2 hours per plane. From Germany, less than an hour, and it happens here. And we should never forget that there are people in need, and none of them had probably thought that there will be one bad day a refugee. And that's why these people need support, and we should give them the support they need.
Chris, let me just ask one last question for clarity. Are you and the UNHCR able to help inside of Ukraine where the Ukrainian government still has control?
Yes, we are. We are in Ukraine for almost 30 years. and we will not leave now. We have not left Afghanistan. We have not left to Syria. We will not leave Ukraine. I mean, a firefighter will not go when there's a fire. He will stay. Of course, that's what we are doing. We have about 120 staff members in the Ukraine. We have our stockpiles there. With items like blankets, sleeping bags, sleeping mats, jerry cans, hygiene articles, diapers, and so on. And we are ready to distribute these articles. But right now, we can't do it because the situation is just too dire.
Are your staff within Ukraine safe?
As safe as you can be in a situation like that. But until now, we do not have any casualties. But it's true that some of our staffers are in bunkers, or at least in a basement or somewhere. And they would love to do their job, but right now they just can't.
Well, we'll wish them safety. In my 30 years of reporting on wars around the world, I run into UNHCR people everywhere. I find them just as heroic as those who carry weapons. Carrying a message of hope to people is incredibly important. You'll be glad to know that our publication gave the Diplomatic Service Medal to the members of the UNHCR team in Ethiopia. We appreciate your work. We've posted for our audience the information and links to UNHCR to make donations. I hope we can stay in touch, Chris, and thank you for your work. On behalf of all of Europe, I want to thank you, and I want to thank our Justice Minister, Helen McAtee, for her tremendous leadership in lifting the visa requirements. Chris, take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Melzer, one of the heroes helping civilians at the border in need. Let's give them our support. This is Miceal O'Hurley reporting for In Conversation This Week with Diplomacy in Ireland, the European Diplomat. Stay safe.
$300 million years ago, there was no Africa, Asia, Americas, or Europe. Just one big supercontinent, Pangea. And today, there is still a force connecting those divided by distance, reversing millions of years of rifting. Making far feel close, bringing there to here. Turkish Airlines.